The orange juice dripped from her hair like tears she refused to cry. But Savannah Wells had stopped crying 12 years ago. The day she learned that sometimes the real criminals wear suits and send innocent men to prison. The cafeteria at Preston Academy had gone silent. 400 students, forks frozen midway to their mouths, watched as Ethan Crawford stood over her with an empty pitcher, his phone still recording, his smile as bright as his future in politics. "There," he announced to his live stream audience, "justice for Katie Morgan. The murderer's daughter gets what she deserves." Savannah didn't move, didn't flinch. The sticky sweetness rolled down her neck, soaking into her second-hand uniform, the one she'd bought at Goodwill because private school tuition had eaten up everything else. She could hear the phones coming out, the whispers starting, the cruel anticipation of her breaking down. Instead, she smiled. If you're feeling that rush of what's going to happen next, hit that like button. It really helps more people discover these stories. And if you want to share where you're watching from, drop it in the comments below. For those who want to support more stories like this one, there's a thanks button right under this video. Every contribution, no matter how small, helps me bring you more inspiring tales of courage and standing up for what's right. Thank you for being here. Now, let's see what happens when push comes to shove. It wasn't a normal smile. It was the kind of smile you learn in prison visiting rooms, watching your father age behind bulletproof glass. The kind you perfect in 7 different schools. Each time the story catches up to you. The kind that says, "I've survived worse than you can imagine." "Orange juice," she said quietly, her voice carrying in the silence. "At least it's not blood, like the blood they said my father had on his hands, the blood that was never there." Ethan's smile faltered for just a second, just long enough for Harper Martinez, sitting 3 tables away with her school newspaper laptop open, to notice, just long enough for something to shift in the carefully choreographed cruelty. But Savannah was already standing, orange juice still dripping, that unsettling smile still in place. She picked up her tray with steady hands, hands that had learned not to shake when child services came knocking. When foster families sent her back, when kids at previous schools had done worse than pour juice. "Sit down," Ethan commanded, his voice sharp with the authority of someone who'd never been told no. "We're not done here." Savannah paused, tilted her head slightly. In that moment, with the afternoon light streaming through the cafeteria windows, she looked older than 17, ancient, almost, like she'd lived 1,000 lives already. "No," she said simply, "but you will be, soon." And then she walked out, leaving sticky footprints and 500 witnesses to wonder what she meant. What none of them knew what Ethan Crawford, with his perfect teeth, and prosecutor father couldn't possibly understand, was that Savannah Wells had been preparing for this moment for 12 years. Ever since she was 5 years old and watched her mother swallow a bottle of pills because she couldn't bear the shame anymore. Ever since she'd started visiting her father every Sunday in Georgia State Prison, learning to read the truth in case files, while other kids learned to read picture books. Preston Academy thought they were getting a charity case when they accepted her. A feel-good story for their diversity brochure. The reformed daughter of an exonerated man, given a chance at excellence. They had no idea they'd just let a hunter into a den of wolves who'd forgotten what real teeth looked like. The story really began 3 weeks earlier, on a humid Tuesday that smelled like fresh starts and old lies. Savannah had been in the administrative office, filling out her final enrollment forms, when she heard the name that made her blood freeze. "Mr. Crawford will see you now," the secretary had chirped to another parent. "He's been so generous with the scholarship program this year." Crawford, the name she'd been writing in notebooks since she was 8. The name at the bottom of every document that had stolen 15 years from her father. The name her mother had whispered before the pills took her voice forever. District Attorney James Crawford. Now Judge Crawford. Donor. Philanthropist. Maker of governors and breaker of lives. Savannah's pen had stopped moving. In the margin of her enrollment form, she'd written one word, "finally," because Savannah Wells hadn't chosen Preston Academy for its excellent academics or beautiful campus. She'd chosen it because Ethan Crawford went there. Because after 7 schools in 12 years, after foster homes and group facilities, after learning to forge signatures and hack court databases, after teaching herself law from prison library books her father smuggled out after all of that, she'd finally found the son of the man who'd destroyed her family. The first day of school had been reconnaissance. Savannah had perfected the art of invisibility long ago, knew how to fade into backgrounds while observing everything. She'd watched Ethan hold court in the hallways, noticed how teachers deferred to him, how he commanded the student council like a future senator practicing his craft. She'd also noticed the locked display case outside the main office. Preston Academy notable alumni. Judge Crawford's photo sat in the center, surrounded by other success stories, men and women who'd gone on to shape Georgia's legal system, its politics, its definition of justice. But Savannah had done her homework. She knew things about those shining success stories that weren't in any display case, like how 3 of them had been promoted after prosecuting cases that were later overturned, like how they'd formed a network that protected each other, promoted each other, covered for each other. Her father's case had been just one thread in a web of corruption that stretched back decades. In her backpack, wrapped in plastic to protect it from teenage carelessness, Savannah carried a manila folder. Inside were photographs of trial evidence, transcripts with highlighted inconsistencies, and most importantly, a diary. Not Katie Morgan's diary that had mysteriously disappeared from evidence, but Savannah's diary, where she'd documented every visit with her father, every detail he'd remembered, every lead that the original defense attorney had been too overworked or too scared to pursue. 12 years of a daughter's obsessive love, transformed into ammunition. She'd been patient, watched Ethan for 2 weeks, learned his patterns, his weaknesses, discovered his morning ritual of live streaming Crawford's campus update to his 3,000 followers, mostly Preston students and alumni children being groomed for greatness. Learned about his girlfriend, Madison Hayes, whose mother sat on the state Supreme Court, about his best friend, Logan Pike, whose family owned the largest private prison company in Georgia. A whole ecosystem of privilege, built on the bones of the innocent. Then her father had made the mistake of loving her too much. Mason Wells had been out for exactly 37 days when he decided to surprise his daughter at school. He'd borrowed a car, put on his only suit, the one the Innocence Project had bought him for his release, and driven to Preston Academy with a bouquet of yellow roses, her mother's favorite flower, the ones he used to bring home every Friday before his world ended. Savannah had been in AP History, taking notes on the Civil Rights Movement, when the intercom crackled to life. "Savannah Wells to the main office. Savannah Wells, you have a visitor." She'd known before she even stood up, felt it in her bones, the way she'd learned to feel danger coming. Her father, sweet and broken and trying so hard to be normal again, had no idea what he'd just done. By the time she reached the office, Ethan was already there. He had a hall pass in his hand, and probably fake. He had a talent for forgery that he used to skip classes, and his phone was out. She watched him recognize her father from the news coverage of his release. Watched the predatory gleam enter his eyes. Watched him start recording. "Is that? Oh my God. That's Mason Wells, the teacher who killed Katie Morgan. He's on school property. This is insane." Her father's face, still too thin from prison food, still carrying that haunted look of a man who'd lived in a cage, crumpled. The roses shook in his hands. I have permission," Mason said quietly. "I'm just here to see my daughter. I have permission." But Ethan was already live streaming, narrating like a true Crawford. "Guys, I can't believe this. Preston Academy is letting a convicted killer walk around our campus. Yeah, I know he got out on some technicality, but Katie Morgan is still dead. Where's the justice for her?" Savannah had walked past Ethan like he didn't exist, wrapped her arms around her father, and whispered, "It's okay, Dad. Let's go." But the damage was done. Within an hour, the video had been shared hundreds of times. Killer on campus at Preston Academy. Parents were calling the administration. The school board was meeting in emergency session, and Ethan Crawford was being hailed as a hero for protecting his fellow students. That night, Savannah had sat in their tiny apartment all they could afford, even with her grandmother's help, and held her father as he cried. Watched him curl into himself the way he'd learned to do in prison, making himself smaller, less of a target. "I'm sorry," he kept saying. "I just wanted to surprise you. I just wanted to do something normal." "I know, Dad," she'd whispered back, stroking his graying hair. He'd gone into prison with thick black hair and a teacher's optimism. He'd come out gray and careful, measuring every movement like it might be used against him. That was the night Savannah decided patience was a luxury she could no longer afford. The next morning, she'd found Ethan waiting by her locker, surrounded by his usual admirers. He was wearing his student council president pin, his Letterman jacket despite the September heat, his smile sharp as surgical instruments. "Hey, Savannah," he'd said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "How's your dad still washing the blood off his hands?" The hallway had gone quiet, even in a school full of future lawyers and politicians. There were lines, but Ethan Crawford had been raised to believe lines were for other people. "My father's hands are clean," Savannah had replied, not looking up from her combination lock. "Can your father say the same?" Ethan had laughed, the sound bright and hollow. "My father put criminals behind bars. He's a hero. Your father, he's just lucky the system failed." "The system didn't fail," Savannah had said, finally meeting his eyes. "It worked exactly as your father designed it to." Something had flickered in Ethan's expression then, just for a moment, but he'd recovered quickly, leaning in close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. "Watch yourself," he'd whispered. "My family owns this town. We could make your life very difficult." Savannah had smiled that unsettling smile again. "You already have. The question is, what happens when people find out how?" She'd walked away then, leaving him standing there with his fists clenched and his followers confused. But she'd known it was only the beginning. Boys like Ethan Crawford didn't handle challenges well. They'd been raised to crush opposition, not engage with it. The campaign had started small, whispers in the hallway. "Did you know her mom killed herself?" Maybe insanity runs in the family. Anonymous posts on the school's social media pages. Why is Preston Academy harboring the family of a killer? Her homework going missing from teachers' desks, her gym clothes disappearing from her locker. Petty cruelties from petty people. But Savannah had survived worse. She'd survived foster families who locked the refrigerator at night, survived group homes where you slept with one eye open, survived the soul-crushing visits to see her father, watching him try to stay sane in a place designed to drive men mad. She could survive Ethan Crawford. What she hadn't expected was Harper Martinez. Harper was the editor of the Preston Academy Herald, a serious girl with serious ambitions who wore her press credentials like armor. She cornered Savannah after AP English one day, her recorder app already running on her phone. "I'm doing a story on wrongful convictions in Georgia," Harper had said without preamble. "I want to interview you about your father's case. No, look, I know you don't trust anyone here. I get it. But I've been researching your father's case for 6 months, before you even transferred. There are things that don't add up." Savannah had stopped walking. Like what? Like the fact that Katie Morgan's best friend, Emma Chen, gave a statement saying Katie was afraid of someone. But it wasn't your father. That statement disappeared from the trial records. Like the fact that the DNA evidence that freed your father was available for testing 15 years ago. But the prosecution fought to prevent it. Like the fact that District Attorney Crawford had a perfect conviction record that year, and it got him appointed to the bench. Harper had pulled out a notebook, pages covered in neat handwriting and highlighted passages. A kindred spirit. Savannah had realized. Another girl who dealt with injustice by documenting it obsessively. "Why do you care?" Savannah had asked. Harper had been quiet for a moment. Then, "My uncle was deported when I was 10. The lawyer said he'd committed fraud. He hadn't, but he didn't speak enough English to defend himself, and we didn't have money for a real attorney. I watched the system chew him up and spit him out. I swore I'd become the kind of journalist who stops that from happening." They'd started meeting in the library after school. Harper had access to news archives through her journalism connections. Savannah had her father's memories and her own research. Together, they'd begun to piece together a story that was bigger than just one wrongful conviction. "Look at this," Harper had said one afternoon, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop. Judge Crawford's conviction rate as a prosecutor, 97%. That's not normal. That's not even possible unless you're manufacturing evidence. Savannah had finished. Or coercing witnesses, or both. Harper had highlighted a column. "See these cases, all of them had the same expert witness. Dr. Richard Vaughn, forensic analyst. Guess who he's married to?" Savannah had leaned forward. Hootie Crawford's sister. The pieces had been falling into place. A network of corruption dressed up as justice. But knowing and proving were two different things. And, meanwhile, Ethan's harassment had been escalating. He'd started a Justice for Katie social media campaign, posting old photos of the dead girl, creating hashtags, organizing memorial events, all carefully crafted to remind everyone that Savannah's father was a killer. Evidence be damned. Then came the orange juice. If this reminds you of someone you knew in school, someone whose pain was turned into sport, remember that cruelty leaves scars that last decades. Savannah stood in the bathroom, wringing orange juice from her hair. When Madison Hayes walked in, Ethan's girlfriend was everything Savannah wasn't: blonde, polished, born into the kind of privilege that made Preston Academy feel like a birthright. "That was gross," Madison said, surprising Savannah, even for Ethan. Savannah said nothing, continuing to clean herself with paper towels that dissolved on contact. "He's scared of you," Madison continued, leaning against the sink. He won't admit it, but I can tell. You don't react the way you're supposed to. It freaks him out. I'm not here to play by his rules, Savannah said quietly. Madison laughed, but it was bitter. None of us are playing by our own rules. You think I want to date him? My mother made it clear Crawford connections are career gold. So I smile and pose for photos and pretend I don't know what his father did to get where he is. Savannah stopped cleaning herself and really looked at Madison for the first time. Saw the careful makeup hiding sleepless nights, the perfect manicure with one nail bitten down to the quick, the designer bag with a hidden pocket full of anxiety medication. What do you know about his father? Savannah asked carefully. Madison glanced at the door, then back. More than I should. Ethan talks in his sleep, has nightmares sometimes, says names, Katie Morgan, Marcus Thompson, Javier Ruiz, Sarah Kim, all people his father prosecuted, all people who claimed they were innocent. Have you ever, what spoken up with what proof? Besides, you've met Ethan. You think he got that cruel streak from nowhere. His father makes him look like a choir boy. Addison pushed off from the sink, straightened her designer uniform. Word of advice. Whatever you're planning, be careful. The Crawfords don't just fight back, they destroy. Completely. She left Savannah alone with her sticky hair and racing thoughts. That afternoon, Savannah skipped her last 2 classes and went to the public library. Not the school library where Harper was waiting, but the big downtown branch where no one from Preston would see her. She needed to think, to plan, to figure out her next move. She found herself in the true crime section, running her fingers along the spines of books about cases like her father's. So many of them. So many innocent people ground up by a system that rewarded convictions over truth. Heavy reading. Savannah turned to find a man in his 50s, wearing a janitor's uniform, pushing a cart of books to be reshelved. Research project, she said automatically. He nodded, but his eyes were knowing. Mason Wells's daughter. Right, I recognize you from the news. Savannah tensed, ready to run. Relax, the man said. I knew your daddy. We were inside together, Block C. He tutored me for my GED. Good man, gentle man. Anyone could see he wasn't no killer. Thank you, Savannah whispered. Michael Turner knows it too, the man continued, shelving books with practiced ease. Used to cry about it in his cell at night. The guilt was eating him alive. Savannah's heart stopped. Michael Turner, the witness who identified my father. The janitor nodded. Conscience is a funny thing. Can only ignore it for so long before it starts screaming. Turner's been out 3 years now. Lives over on Maple Street. Drinks at Murphy's bar most nights. Trying to forget what he done. He pushed his cart away before Savannah could ask more questions, leaving her standing in an aisle of books about injustice with a name that could change everything. Michael Turner, the star witness, whose testimony had put her father away. The man who'd claimed to see Mason Wells with Katie Morgan the night she died. The man who'd lied. Murphy's bar squatted on Maple Street like a wounded animal, all cracked neon and peeling paint. The kind of place where broken men went to break a little more. Savannah had waited 3 days after the library encounter. 3 days of Ethan's escalating campaign. 3 days of her father growing quieter and smaller in their apartment. She pushed through the door at 8:30 on a Thursday night, the smell of stale beer and old regrets hitting her immediately. Michael Turner sat at the end of the bar, exactly where the janitor said he'd be. 53 years old according to court records, but looking 70. Prison and guilt had a way of aging a man. "Whiskey," she told the bartender, sliding a fake ID across the scarred wood. He barely glanced at it. This wasn't the kind of place that cared about rules. She carried her untouched drink to Turner's corner, sat down without asking. He looked up with bloodshot eyes, took in her dark hair, her careful expression, and his hands started shaking. "Jesus," he whispered, "you look just like him, Mason's girl." "Savannah," she said simply. Turner drained his glass, signaled for another. His hands shook so bad the bartender had to steady the pour. "I've been expecting you for years, wondering when you'd come." "Why, Pooey," Savannah kept her voice level, fought the urge to scream 15 years of rage into his face. "Why did you lie?" Turner laughed, ugly and broken. "You think I had a choice? Crawford had me on possession charges. Third strike. I was looking at life. Life. For some weed. He comes to me with a deal. Say I saw your daddy with that girl, and the charges disappear. New identity. Fresh start. Little cash to get established. So you traded my father's life for yours." "I was scared." Turner's voice cracked. "You don't know what Crawford's like when he wants something. He had photos of my daughter, said accidents happen to families of uncooperative witnesses. What would you have done?" Savannah thought of her father teaching literacy in prison, keeping his gentleness alive in a place designed to kill it. Thought of her mother's empty pill bottle, and final note, "I can't live in a world this cruel." "I would have told the truth," she said quietly. Turner laughed again, bitter as the whiskey. "Easy to say when you're not the one in that room, when it's not your baby girl in those photos." He pulled out a worn wallet, showed her a picture. A little girl, maybe 6, gap-toothed smile. "She's 21 now, in college, pre-med, wants to help people. How's that for irony? My mother's dead," Savannah said flatly. "Suicide. I was 5. Turner's face crumpled. He aged another 10 years in seconds. I know what I took from you, from your daddy. Not a day goes by I don't think about it. Thinking doesn't bring back 15 years. No," Turner agreed, "but maybe this can start to make it right." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a small digital recorder. "Been carrying this for 2 years. Recording every conversation with Crawford, every threat he made back then, every promise. Got him on tape last month, drunk at some fundraiser, bragging about his perfect conviction record. How he created witnesses when God didn't provide them." Savannah stared at the recorder. Such a small thing to hold so much power. "Why haven't you gone to the police? With what credibility? I'm a convicted felon who already lied once. They'd bury me. But you..." He slid the recorder across the bar. "You got that girl helping you. The journalist. Maybe together you can make someone listen." Savannah pocketed the recorder, left her untouched whiskey on the bar. At the door. She turned back. Why now? Why give this to me now?" Turner met her eyes, and for the first time, she saw the man he might have been before Crawford broke him. Because Crawford's about to do it again. That memorial Ethan's planning. His daddy's going to announce his run for Attorney General there. More power, more innocent people. I can't let it happen again. Outside Murphy's bar, Savannah called Harper. "We need to meet. Now." They sat in Harper's car, engine running, listening to Turner's recordings. Crawford's voice, smooth as aged bourbon, talking about conviction rates and playing the game and knowing which witnesses would break under the right pressure. "This is it," Harper breathed. "This is enough to reopen everything. Not yet, Savannah said. He's smart. He'll claim it's doctored, out of context. We need more. The memorial's tomorrow. Ethan's got half the school coming, plus media. His father's giving the keynote about justice and victims' rights. Harper's fingers flew across her phone. What if we gave them a show they weren't expecting? Savannah thought about Ethan's live stream addiction, his need to broadcast every moment. He'll be streaming the whole thing. Exactly. And streams can't be edited after the fact. Whatever happens, happens live. They spent the night planning. Harper used her journalism connections to track down Emma Chen, Katie Morgan's best friend who'd moved to California after graduation. 3 a.m. phone calls, promises of finally getting the truth out, careful coordination. By morning, they had what they needed. The Preston Academy auditorium was packed for the Katie Morgan Memorial, 15 years later, and the Crawfords had turned a tragedy into a political platform. Banners with Katie's school photo hung from the walls. Justice for Katie, in letters 3 feet tall. Savannah sat in the back row, Harper beside her with her phone ready. They watched Ethan take the stage, his father behind him, both in matching dark suits like a political dynasty in training. "Thank you all for coming," Ethan began, his phone already streaming to thousands. "Today we remember Katie Morgan, whose life was cut short by violence, whose killer walked free on a technicality." Judge Crawford stepped forward, all gravitas and practiced sorrow. "Katie represents every victim failed by a system that values criminal rights over justice. When I was district attorney, I made a promise. You made a lot of promises." The voice came from the side entrance. Michael Turner, shaking but determined, walked into the auditorium. Behind him, an older woman, Emma Chen, flown in on a red-eye, carrying a box of documents. "Security!" Crawford barked. But Turner was already at the microphone Ethan had abandoned in shock. "My name is Michael Turner," he said, voice carrying through the speakers and straight into Ethan's live stream. 15 years ago, I lied on the witness stand. I said I saw Mason Wells with Katie Morgan the night she died. I lied because District Attorney Crawford threatened my family if I didn't." The auditorium erupted, parents shouting, students filming, security moving forward. But Turner kept talking. Faster now. "I never saw Mason Wells that night. I was in county lockup, which Crawford knew. He had me released specifically to create a witness. He coached me on what to say. Crawford lunged for the microphone, but Emma Chen's voice rang out from her own phone, connected to the Bluetooth speakers. "This is Katie Morgan's real diary, the one that disappeared from evidence. Listen to her own words." Katie's voice, young and scared, filled the auditorium. "He keeps following me, the older man from the courthouse. Says if I tell anyone about what I saw, I'll end up like the others. I think he means the defendants who disappeared. I'm scared. I'm going to tell Mr. Wells tomorrow. He'll know what to do." "She came to your father," Emma said, looking directly at Savannah. "The next day, she was dead, and the man from the courthouse." She described him in detail. Emma held up a sketch. She was an artist. She drew him. The sketch looked exactly like a younger James Crawford. "Lies!" Crawford roared, but Turner was already playing his recordings. Crawford's own voice, bragging about manufacturing evidence, destroying lives for conviction rates, building his career on the bones of the innocent. Ethan stood frozen on stage, his live stream capturing everything, his perfect world crumbling in real time as thousands watched. His face cycled through denial, rage, recognition, and finally, devastating comprehension. "Dad." His voice was small, young. "Dad, tell them it's not true." But Crawford was already pushing toward the exit, phone to his ear. Lawyer mode activated. Security moved to stop him, but he snarled something about warrants and jurisdiction. "The FBI has jurisdiction," a new voice said from the main entrance. Special Agent Patricia Kim, accompanied by a full team. "James Crawford, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and conspiracy to commit murder." The rest happened in slow motion. Crawford in handcuffs. Parents screaming about lawsuits. Students either fleeing or filming. Ethan still on stage, still streaming, looking lost and young and broken. Savannah stood up. Walked down the aisle. Everyone else was fleeing up. She climbed the stage stairs, approached Ethan, who was standing there like a scarecrow missing its stuffing. "Your viewers are watching," she said quietly. He looked at his phone like he'd forgotten it existed. 3,000 viewers. Comments flowing too fast to read. His carefully curated image destroyed in minutes. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I know," Savannah said. And she did. She recognized the look in his eyes, the mirror of her own at 5 years old. Learning the father you loved was called a monster. Everything I believed, everything he taught me, was a lie. But you're not him. Savannah made a choice then. The same choice her father had made every day in prison, choosing gentleness over bitterness. You're 18 years old. You get to decide who you become now. Ethan laughed, hollow and broken. "Who'd want to become anything related to me? My father's a killer, an actual killer." "Join the club," Savannah said dryly, "except mine was innocent." They stood there on the stage, the golden boy and the girl he'd tried to destroy. While chaos swirled around them, Harper appeared with her phone, having recorded everything for her story. "The Innocence Project wants to interview you," she told Savannah. "You and your father. They're talking about a full investigation into all of Crawford's cases." "How many?" Savannah asked. "At least 40 with questionable convictions. Your father was just the beginning." Ethan made a sound like a wounded animal. 40 families destroyed. 40 lives stolen, all for his father's ambition. "I want to help," he said suddenly. "I have access to his home office, his files, everything." He looked at Savannah with desperate eyes. "Please, let me help fix this." Savannah studied him, saw past the golden boy exterior to the human being underneath, cracking under the weight of inherited sins. She'd spent 12 years planning revenge, but standing here, she realized something revenge was just another kind of prison. Her father had taught her that, through 15 years of refusing to let bitterness consume him. "Okay," she said finally. "But we do this right. Legal. Documented. No more lies. Not even for justice." 6 months later. Savannah sat in the Innocence Project office, sorting through case files. Her father worked at the desk across from her, teaching literacy to other exonerees, using his pain to prevent others. His smile came easier now, though the shadows never fully left his eyes. Harper typed furiously at her laptop. Working on her 20th article about wrongful convictions in Georgia. She'd won a National Journalism Award for her coverage. Full scholarship to Columbia Journalism School. But she still came in every week to help. The door opened, and Ethan Crawford walked in carrying a box of files. He looked different now, humbler. The arrogance replaced by quiet determination. He'd legally changed his last name to his mother's maiden name, Parker. Started over. "These are from the storage unit," he said, setting the box on the table. "Property receipts from 2009 through 2011. Harper, you were right about the evidence tampering, and they worked in comfortable silence. 4 people brought together by tragedy, choosing to transform it into purpose. The wall behind them showed photos of 12 people already exonerated based on their work. 12 families reunited. 12 futures restored. "There's someone here to see you," the receptionist announced. Madison Hayes walked in, no longer the perfect princess. She'd cut her hair short, traded designer clothes for practical ones. Law school had changed her. Or maybe she'd changed herself. "The State Bar agreed to review all of Judge Crawford's cases," she announced. Mom recused herself, obviously, but the other justices are taking this seriously. Real reform might actually happen. She sat down next to Ethan, who she'd stayed with through everything, not because their parents demanded it, but because she'd seen him at his lowest and chosen to help him climb back up. "Any word on your father's trial?" Savannah asked Ethan. "Postponed again. His lawyers keep filing motions, but the FBI says they have enough to put him away for life." Ethan's voice was steady. He'd learned to speak about his father's crimes without flinching. 43 wrongful convictions so far. 7 suspicious deaths in custody. Katie Morgan's case is going to a grand jury. They returned to work, processing the weight of those numbers. 43 innocent people. 7 who'd never made it home. All for one man's ambition. "You know what Katie wanted to be," Emma Chen had told them during one of their interviews. "A teacher like your father, Savannah." She admired him, said he was the only adult who listened. That's why she was going to tell him about Crawford. She trusted him. Savannah's father had cried when he heard that. 15 years thinking he'd failed to protect a student, only to learn she'd died trying to protect others. As the sun set through the office windows, casting long shadows across their work, Savannah thought about justice, not the performance Crawford had sold, but the real thing, messy and slow and imperfect, but honest. Her phone buzzed. A text from a number she didn't recognize. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I saw your story on the news. I think my brother was one of Crawford's victims. Can you help?" She showed it to the others. Another case, another family seeking truth, another chance to turn pain into purpose. "We'll call him tomorrow," Harper said, already making notes. "Set up a meeting." Ethan nodded, pulling out his laptop to start research. Madison began checking legal precedents. Savannah's father rolled his chair over to read the message. This was their life now. Not the one any of them had planned, but the one they'd chosen, built on the ruins of lies, held together by truth, aimed at a justice that actually deserved the name. Savannah looked at her father, at her unlikely team of broken people made whole through purpose, and thought about her mother, wondered if she'd be proud of what her daughter had become, not vengeful, but determined, not bitter, but wise. "She would be," her father said quietly, reading her face the way he always could. "She would be so proud." Outside, Atlanta hummed with life. Inside, 5 people worked to undo the damage one man's ambition had caused. It would take years, maybe decades, but they had time. After all, Savannah Wells had learned patience in the hardest classroom imaginable. And now, finally, She was teaching others the lesson her father had taught her, that justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied. That truth, however long buried, has a way of finding light, that sometimes the greatest revenge is choosing not to become the monster that made you. The orange juice had long since been washed away, but what remained, the bonds forged in pursuit of truth, would last forever. Years later, when people asked Savannah why she'd forgiven Ethan Crawford Parker, now she'd think of that moment on the stage. Two children of different kinds of monsters, choosing to break the cycle. Forgiveness isn't about them, she'd say. It's about freeing yourself. Preston Academy had removed the Crawford name from buildings, from donor walls, from history. But they'd added something new, the Mason Wells Center for Restorative Justice, where students learned that true strength wasn't about power over others, but power over yourself. And sometimes, late at night in the office, when they'd freed another innocent person, Savannah would catch her reflection in the window and see her mother's eyes looking back. Not broken anymore, not defeated, alive.